So is it legal, is it even possible to annul a presidency? Julian Epstein is a Democrat and former counsel to the House Judiciary Committee. He joins us now. So, Julian, I have noticed that the left has become more than anything a religious movement, and the use of the term annulment kind of proves it. If the presidency were annulled, as Reich suggests, would heretics who persist on acknowledging that Trump was once president, would they be punished?
It's a funny way to put the question. I don't think annulment is a serious argument. I don't think we're at the threshold of impeachment yet. I think there is a tendency going on with Democrats right now, as there was during the '98 Clinton impeachment, for people in the opposition party to scream loud and to try to get an attention and to scream kind of louder than the other because it helps with clicks on websites and it helps get them on television. But I don't think it's a serious argument.
But it's a different. So you and I had many debates during impeachment.
'98,
so long we've known each other. And there were people who were claiming that Bill Clinton murdered someone at Mena Airport.
Precisely.
And, there was a lot of that stuff.
Precisely.
But it wasn't coming...
Vince Foster.
For sure. But it wasn't coming from former cabinet secretaries.
Dan Burton.
Okay, you had a member
of
Congress who had all kinds of theories, but he was embarrassed of those theories. And when confronted with them, he's like, oh, I didn't really think that. Here you have pillars of the Democratic establishment saying on television things that are so far out and extreme, I'm not even sure how to respond to them. Does that make you uncomfortable?
I don't know if he's a pillar of the Democratic establishment. I think he was a labor secretary under Clinton, and I think he's a very good economist. I think he's a sharp thinker as an economist. He is not a lawyer, and I don't think he's a legal scholar, and I think he'd probably do better staying away from that. I think there were plenty of Republican members of Congress that said very extremist things during Clinton impeachment. So I think it happens on both sides. It's a natural thing that occurs.
I don't think anybody accused Bill
of
Clinton of treason. So here you
People accuse Bill Clinton of murder.
But not in public. I mean, they sort of whispered about it. But you didn't have, for example, a former head of the CIA. Does it bother you, actually, that John Brennan, who was complimented by Republicans, by the way, when he first got in, I'll concede that, but he was the head of the CIA, and now he's accusing a political opponent of a death penalty offense with no evidence. Does it bother you that he ran the most powerful intelligence agency in the world?
Well, I think what Brennan was referring to, and people use treason in different ways. People sometimes use treason in a legal sense, and sometimes people use treason in a more vernacular sense. And I think what Brennan was talking about was Trump continually cozying with Putin, who I think most Republicans would agree is an enemy of the United States. And certainly an opponent of the United States.
I don't know if I would agree with that. I mean, he's certainly no more bloodthirsty than lots of Middle Eastern tyrants.
I think if you look at what he's done with the airliners, I think if you look at what he's done in Crimea and Syria, I don't think he's a guy that's looking out for U.S. interests.
No, of course he's not looking out for U.S. interests. I think he would undermine U.S. interests. So would a lot of countries.
That was the point. But look, I think you can go back and forth. We could go back, as we did in '98, and you go back. You can find extremists on both sides who will say things that, again, I think are designed to get attention, get on television, get clickbait for the things.
Sure, but then you also, and what you're saying is absolutely right, but you also have people like, I don't know, the ranking Democrat on the House Intel Committee, who on this show accused me of carrying water for Putin because I had sincere questions about the evidence of collusion. So you do have a kind of different level of extremism, I would argue, but it leads to this question, which is, if Trump is guilty of these crimes that virtually everyone on the left alleges, then why aren't we just saying out loud, there's an impeachment coming? Why are Democrats ashamed of that?
As to the question of extremism, there's a lot of extremism going on both sides. And I hope, as a thoughtful guy that you are, that you would denounce it, the extremism that's occurring on the right. I denounce the extremism that's occurring on the left. I think the Robert Reich article was ridiculous. That's the first point. The second point is not everybody on the left is saying Trump is guilty of crimes. I don't think there's proof yet that Trump is guilty of crimes. I think the question on campaign finance, as we were discussing before we came on air, I don't think that reaches an impeachable offense, and I think it's questionable as whether it reaches a legal offense because of the ambiguity of campaign finance laws. We can talk about that more.
No, well, of course, I agree.
I think the question on collusion rests entirely on whether Trump had advanced knowledge of any illegal activity that was connected to Russian hacking. That has not been proven yet. So this Democrat is not alleging a crime as it involves Donald Trump.
But you know as well as I that the pressure, and the polls bear this out, the pressure from Democratic voters to impeach if Democrats retake the House will be so overwhelming that what speaker could look at the people who just put him or her in that position and say, you know, we're not impeaching?
Well,
Can they resist impeachment?
what I was going to say, one of the reasons that I think there's so much pressure around these investigations is how badly the Trump White House has handled the Russian investigation matter. It looks at every turn that they are trying to cover up crimes, whether it is the firing, the threatened firings, the promises of pardons, all of the flipping of the witness. The accountant has flipped on the president. His attorney has flipped on the president. Campaign manager. The poor way, and Giuliani
is looking guilty the same as being guilty?
No, it's not. Not in a legal.
Okay.
No, Tucker. Not in a legal world, but in a political way. You know as well as I do that the actions of this White House have looked guilty from the beginning. Has made them look guilty. It doesn't mean that they're guilty in a legal sense, but it has been handled horribly. Okay. Now, it's the Democrats, where the Democrats ought to be, and what I would argue, and I've spoken to Democrats on the Hill, is they should not be coming to legal conclusions or conclusions about impeachment at this point.
But can they resist
what
impeachment?
They should be,
can they, their voters
if they're
want it?
Smart. Well, this is the problem with the polarized politics as we play to the extreme bases. And Republicans do this, I think, I would argue, more so than Democrats do. But we can disagree about that.
I don't see that at all.
We can disagree about that. But if Democrats were smart, they would tell the base that we're not going to kind of kowtow to the impulses that may make you feel better emotionally. We're going to do what you and I would probably agree ought to be done here. Listen to the point.
If you can find one Democratic leader, look, I agree with you. Of course,
it's the Democratic leadership.
If you can find one Democratic leader with the huevos to say something like that on television, I'll give you $20.
Well, I think that's basically what the Democrats are saying in other words. And what the Democrats ought to be saying, Tucker, is
we're almost at time.
We're not going to make conclusions about impeachment. We're not going to make conclusions about prosecution. We want facts to come out. We want to protect the independent counsel and all the other investigations that are underway. We should protect the integrity of the investigation.
Then they should tell the treason
and allow
chorus
the
to
facts
shut up.
And allow the facts to come out.
All right.
And you ought to be there and I ought to be there. And we ought to say, let's make a decision.
I've been saying that since day one. I'm just totally, it's been 2 years
But
now.
are you for the Republican plan, the Senate bipartisan Republican plan that protects the
for running the government
counsel?
and like rescuing the middle class from oblivion.
Well,
that was the whole point
what
of
about
this.
the Grassley bill that would protect the special counsel?
Oh, I don't know. I don't think we should have any special counsels of any kind. It's unaccountable to the voters.
But now that there's an investigation, do you think the integrity
I just want it to go away and think about why. No, I'm serious. And think about why 70,000 people died of drug ODs last year. There's like real stuff going on.
But you just said that you think the integrity of the investigation ought to be protected.
Right. I think I asked. Look, it's just the whole thing is so stupid. I've run out of patience for it. But that's not why I asked you to come on tonight. Julian, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, Tucker.